Did you want to introduce us to Horrorland this time instead of me? Did you want to do the hello? You've never done the hello.
I haven't done hello. I don't know if I can do the hello.
Do you want to try?
Alright. Hi everybody, we're back again.
We're back to Horrorland.
This is really exciting. We're big fans of the Horrorland series to date.
We are.
And today we're looking at Who's Your Mummy?
This is gonna be a good one. It was fun. I'm excited.
Yes. I'm not sure if much of the Horrorland series is available through Kobo or Kindle, so you can check out your local library or bookstore if you want to go in and buy it new.
Yes, we did have problems with Series 2000, so whenever we do go to do those books in the future, for Series 2000 specifically, be sure to check your library, because that one is not really available as ebooks. So far, me personally, I haven't had trouble finding some of the newer classics that they reprinted, but not the original classics, on Kobo. And the Horrorland ones so far have been available, but if there's ever any issues with it that maybe we don't know about, let us know so we can make an announcement, tell the club members, let people know where to get the book.
Yeah, for sure.
This one was book number 6 for Horrorland. It was published in January of 2009.
Yes.
And we open with one of my least favorite Goosebumps openings, which is the let me recount a story. I didn't know this was gonna happen. Again, not done as badly as it has been in some of the other ones. It's just, it's really become a device I'm not that fussy on anyway. Like, you've got to do something really interesting with that device.
It's like a writing style or something.
Yeah, in order for me to really like it. That's sort of like, oh, little did I know thing. Like, you really gotta amp that up and make it really interesting and really good without giving away too much of your story. This would have opened just as well had they started with, we were playing around her furniture, as it would have without that extra little opening. But other from that, this is where we start.
Right, so the kids are goofing off in the living room playing with water guns. And,
I'm sorry, water guns.
Yes.
Water guns in the house. Either of my grandmothers would have had the biggest conniption. I've been playing water gun.
Yeah, my parents were too thrilled either when we did it. For the record, it didn't happen. But they weren't happy.
They weren't happy for that thing we didn't do.
Right? Okay, so Granny V isn't well, and she pulls Abby aside and says that she's going into the hospital for 2 weeks for tests. And both Abby and Peter will be going to visit their Uncle Jonathan, whom they've never met in person.
Right. And this is a newer relative. It's the first time, actually, we see kids being raised by a single parent, which is really great to see. It's also the first time that single parent is a grandparent.
Yeah, and not actually one of their biological
parents. Again, Abby's 12, Peter's 10. You know the drill.
Falls into the cookie cutter mold. So, apparently Uncle Jonathan last seen them when they were babies, so neither one of them would remember any of that.
He's been sent pictures.
Yeah.
And according to her, well, Granny V, he's really excited that they're coming.
Right. So when they arrive at the train station, Jonathan isn't there to pick them up.
No, so they look around a little bit.
Right.
He lives in Cranford. He lives in Cranford in Vermont. And this place is like very old-fashioned.
I love the way it's described.
I know. Vermont is like known as like a touristy old world destination anyway. So there's this little like Victorian style village, except like really, really Well, more Old English than Victorian, with really small houses.
Yeah.
It's this idyllic countryside.
And if it wasn't kept up as much as it appears to be, you'd think it'd be like a ghost town, an abandoned mine town or something.
But it's not. It's one of those places that's been, I guess, designated historical. So everything is kept perfectly accurate. And we've seen places like that I should say, when we went on a school trip, I saw a place like that in England where everything was kept with like the old cobblestone. And so everything's described the same way, like the older houses, the old cobblestone, everything kept up to date, but kept exactly the same and sort of like preserved in time.
Right. So they look around and they see the town looks to be about 100 years old. It's like it's trapped in a back in time state. And there's a castle-like house up on a dark hill.
Yeah. And so it's a huge hill. It's like shading part of the town.
With something flying around the outside.
And it describes it as being like this big mansion with almost like towers. And to me, this one is more Victorian style rather than Old English.
It sticks out.
And the first thing I wrote down in my notes was like, oh, like the Addams Family. Like a big old house on the top of a hill with towers. And
and of course the kids have to jump to the worst case scenario. That's where Uncle Jonathan lives, in that big scary house.
Yeah, nobody's mentioned that's where he lives. No. They would have no reason to think that's where he lives, but for whatever reason, when they're approached by a person going, oh, hey, you're here, are you lost? Because there's nobody else around.
Right.
They're like, oh, we think we're supposed to go to that place over there, maybe?
And that lady's name turns out to be Annie.
Yes.
Crazy Annie, for some reason. So, shortly after she leaves...
and gives them a spooky warning about moans coming from there at night.
And they should turn around and get back on the train and go back home. A horse-drawn carriage appears.
Very old-fashioned.
Very, very much so. And, the lady Annie had a bluebird on her neck. Too.
Yeah, she had a bluebird tattoo.
This is the first time I noticed in the Goosebumps series where they talked about body art.
Yeah, and this was like the first like known tattoo I think that we've seen.
Yeah.
But it was neat.
It was, and it kind of creates her character, I think, too. This man that shows up in the horse-drawn carriage claims to be Jonathan. Their uncle introduces himself as Jonathan and picks up the kids in this beautiful carriage, and they go up to that dark house on the hill just as they anticipated.
So this is where they're staying, and the thing they wondered about was flying around that her brother joked was bats was actually bats. I don't know why, but it is.
Yeah. Everybody has to have their pets, I suppose.
I suppose.
When they get into the house, they notice it is decked out in Egyptian decor.
Oh, like hugely, as in artifacts everywhere. Hieroglyphics on the wall. Old 1,000-year-old, well, several 1,000-year-old paintings. Like everything is just
museum quality. You wouldn't expect to see like a whole entire house.
No, this is like somebody stole this from an archaeological dig kind of thing. And the place is described as like there's a pyramid shape rising up through the part of the living room where the fireplace is, and like everything is like super Egyptian.
Yep, very, very themed. When they walk into the house, they also meet Sonia, yeah. Sonia. I wasn't sure if that was Sonia or Sanja, because as it gets further on in the book,
the way they pronounce it is kind of weird.
Yeah, so we'll go with Sonia because it's easier. And she is the housekeeper. And she brings them up to their bedrooms and tells them not to enter the room at the end of the hall because that is Jonathan's private quarters.
Yes, so they're not to go in there ever unless they're invited.
And then it's coming that they're going to go in that room because...
Obviously, the minute there's a hidden secret room you're not supposed to go in, even if it's not hidden or like a locked door you're not supposed to open, your main characters are going to open it.
Yeah, so that's where this story is going. Abby takes a nap and is woken suddenly by a black cat.
Yeah, so this one is our typical jump scare. It's our first one of the book.
It is.
She wakes up to, she sees a shadow moving like across the wall, and then next thing you know, it's choking her.
Yeah, it's like cats don't have like opposable thumbs.
No.
So
it's putting weight on her throat, I guess.
Yeah. And this cat's described as being all black with a V on its chest and goes by Cleopatra.
White-shaped V, yeah. And the way it's described as being almost human-like and like, oh, she doesn't like changes and I don't think she likes me in particular, Abby says of it. And automatically I was getting hints of monster blood all over the place, the first book.
Is this cat a witch? Are we going to wait and see or are they going to tell us now? She's not a witch. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, no, it's not a witch.
So when Sonia pulls the cat off of Abby, she makes a second comment about Abby's hair.
Yeah.
Like Sonia made a first comment when she first met him, and I just kind of brushed that off as an okay, you know, she's complimenting the hair.
And
it's kind of like a...
sometimes they use other people, especially in the Horrorland books, to give descriptions of the main characters
Yeah.
rather than outright describing them,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of a neat device. So you kind of think, oh, maybe it's just to like tell you more about what this character looks like.
Yeah, but this is the second time Sonia admires her hair.
And this time it's pretty creepy, and she like runs her fingers through it.
Yeah, like sometimes when like you're meeting somebody new, you're like, oh, I like your whatever. Just
But you don't like touch
yeah,
them.
like
That's weird.
Yeah, it's too much. So I did make note of the second time because like, okay, this is going to be a recurring theme. So after supper, Jonathan shows the kids the temple in his basement because he's going on about the different artifacts.
Right.
And the mummies. And Peter is very much obsessed with mummies.
Yeah, Peter thinks the artifacts are so cool, and he's like, will we see an actual mummy? And he's like, oh, well, maybe. And then after supper, he promises to take them and show them the mummy. And it's for, it said the name, I had it written here somewhere.
Charon Tush,
That's the one.
the boy pharaoh.
And I mean, I'm wondering, why is it always Tut things in these books? I think that's just because they only know of, like, King Tut.
He's the most famous, so let's branch off of that one.
Yeah. But, I mean, and they talk about how unbelievably huge this house is as they're going through it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's so many quarters and rooms and everything everywhere, and he's leading them down a basement where there's an actual tomb, where there's an actual mummy, and it's like, how big is this house?
He refers to it as a temple, too. Like, he
Yeah.
has a temple in his
So this
basement.
is a temple room in a basement. And it's like, but it seems like so sprawling, and there's these like tower-like side structures, and it just makes me wonder, like, is this go out into the cliffside? Like, it has to, right? Because it's too large. Like, the house is too big.
So how big is this temple?
How big is this house anyway?
There's only 2 people living in it so far that we've met.
Yes.
Right? So when Abby leans closer to take a closer look at the mummy, she hears a whisper, "Who's your mummy?" And it's Peter pulling a prank, and she nearly like
Loses it.
yeah.
And of course, this is our signature. Here's the title of the book in the book.
Yeah. And our second jump scare.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So that night, as Abby is trying to get to sleep, she hears the moans that Annie has told her that she hears. And she discovers that her bedroom window is open through getting up to kind of find out where the moans are coming from. And insert our next jump scare. In flies a bat.
Through the window.
She is freaking out. The bat is flying around. And just as quickly as it came into her room, it went out.
It zooms back out. And so she watches shutting the window behind it, which leads her to see what the bats are in a frenzy flying around about.
Yeah, there's a man out on the lot.
Yeah, with a long trench coat. He's got a scar on his forehead. He's bald. And
He's just outside of her window.
yeah, and looking up to see if he can see them. And she thinks he sees her, so she kind of tucks behind the curtain a little because she's afraid there's this strange man out there in the middle of the night and the bats are swarming him. And he's screaming and she's terrified. Now, he does run away and leave his trench coat behind.
Yeah.
But she comes out screaming, looking for Uncle John, going, you know, we gotta help this man from the bats. What's going on?
And she, like, this is a scary stranger danger moment, too. Like, she's in a place where she's not as familiar with the surroundings. And all of a sudden, there's a stranger outside of her window that's being attacked by bats. She doesn't like bats. Bats are probably not common where she's too... She doesn't know why this man is looking in her window.
Yeah.
She's got a lot going on. So Sonia hears Abby looking for Jonathan and told her that the bats are there to protect the house.
Yeah, so she says, you know, oh, the bats, they live in this area naturally. Their land is here, so they're very protective of the castle.
Yeah.
And she's like, no one will get in as long as they're here, because they'll protect this place.
And I don't know a lot about bats, but I don't know them to be a protective species.
Overly territorial?
Yeah.
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, more so if you were in a cave, I think, where there's a lot of them.
But then they're startled when they're coming out.
You tend to startle them.
Yeah.
And it's not so much that they would attack you. Again, I'm not super familiar with bats, but from what I know of them, they're pretty docile creatures.
They keep to themselves. They don't go after.
Yeah.
You never hear of a bat coming down at like a cat or dog or a squirrel in the wild like you would like a hawk or
no, because they tend to eat insects and like fruits and stuff and scavenge that way. They're not really predators.
So that kind of got to me there. But Sonia also mentions that the man will most likely not be back. So hopefully the man has gotten a fright and he's run off and he knows that he can't come anywhere near the house. So Abby returns to bed and hears the moaning, which is now turned into a chant.
Yeah, and she's starting to like recognize what it is, and she's starting to pick out words.
Right, so it's saying, I want to die.
What? That is a chant, if ever there was a chant.
Yeah, so she's had a rough night and it just got a little bit worse.
And now she's absolutely terrified.
So the cat comes back to Abby. This cat has a thing for her. And
yeah, the next morning when she's brushing her hair.
Yeah.
What does she notice before the cat comes back?
A part of her hair has been cut out.
Right? Like, crazy.
When did this happen?
And she's like absolutely devastated. And she's like, who would do this in my sleep? Like, what is going on?
So, the cat attacks her again. And she's like, okay, well, I'm going to take care of this. This cat's not going to be attacking me the whole time I'm here. So she grabs her water blaster and squirts the cat.
Yeah, she's like, that'll teach it a lesson. Cats don't like water. Like, and I'm sure you're familiar with the old trick, if you want a cat to stay away from it, you give it a little spritz with like one of those light mist water spray things.
Unless it's one of my cats who loves water, then you're screwed. But this cat doesn't run from the water.
No.
It falls apart and disintegrates into a pile of dust. Like
right before her eyes. So now she is freaked out.
That is not a normal response for a cat getting wet.
No. She runs and gets Peter.
Yes, and then they both go looking for Jonathan because she tells Peter what happened. She's like, we need to get out of here. This isn't okay.
We'll convince him that Granny V called.
Yeah.
And we'll say she's ready now. She needs us back. And we have to go home right away. She's like, he won't question that, and he'll have to take us into town.
Right, so they look for Jonathan. They can't find him. So they go into the private quarters.
Because of course they do. And the door just happens to be unlocked.
I think that was set up.
Oh, definitely, because they knew they were looking around at this point.
Yeah. So when they walk into the private quarters, they see 3 mummy cases inside.
Yeah, and then they notice, oh, hang on, there's more than 3. There's like rows of mummy cases.
Yeah, and there's a moaning going on.
And it sounds like they're coming from one particular row of the mummy cases. What the heck is going on?
Right.
And she doesn't want to look too closely, but there's another door at the end and it's open a crack. So her and Peter think this has to be it. So Peter pushes forward.
And that's where they find Jonathan. And he's working over a mummy. And not only is he working over a mummy, he has dug both of his hands inside of it. And he's pulling out organs to eat. Like the liver
and they watch
kidneys.
him eat a kidney, I think it is.
Something
like
that.
This big, they describe it as purple, globular, maybe liver, maybe kidney. And just see him eating it. And she talks about how gross it is and how she'll never forget, like, how wet and gross it was. And she keeps referring to that over and over a little bit as they try to, like, get away.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing that struck me as super weird. Because if it's a mummy, all the organs have been removed. All the main ones. Early Egyptians did embalming. Like, they filled the body with, like, potpourri and different things to make it smell good, to dry it out.
And the organs were put in jars. Right, Right. So Abby and Peter rush out of the room, and they go to grab her cell phone to call for help. They need the police. Like, something is happening and it's not normal.
Yeah, and they know they can't trust Jonathan now.
Right. But now they notice that the battery is pulled out of the cell phone. Not that the battery's dead for any rhyme or reason, but the actual battery is missing. So I think this kind of dates the phone for one of those like flip phones where the battery just kind of clicks on the back.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you wouldn't see it on a smartphone today.
Right. You would have to like unscrew it and carefully take it apart to notice your battery
Yep.
was missing. So this is definitely a 90s flip phone, even though by the time this book was written,
Smartphones
it
were a
was
thing.
past the era. And smartphones were definitely a thing because he talks about needing a new iPod.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is that maybe this was just like a phone for Granny V to reach her.
Yes.
This wasn't a plaything or something.
Simple, low-tech thing
Yeah.
that would be easy to give to kids that they wouldn't necessarily get obsessed with screens or accidentally make payments or anything like that.
And if it broke, it broke. It was maybe like a pay-as-you-go or something.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
wouldn't have been like a ton of money to have a broken phone that you'd given to a small child.
Yeah, right. So they're like, well, we're not staying here even though the phone is broken and we can't call for help. So they grab what they can, hoodies, shoes. They leave their suitcases behind.
And all their other possessions.
Yeah, and they start hoofing it down the road.
Yeah, they're like, we're not going to take time to pack.
No.
We're just going to get out of here now.
Right. So they walk down to the train station through the creepy road.
Yeah, and it takes them a long time to get there actually because like the fog is coming in and it describes the fog
sea.
waxing and waning and coming in over the edge of the valley, and you know the bats are active and so they're afraid of the bats and they don't want to like make the bats chase them too much.
And when they arrive at the train station, there's a man.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, there you are. I've been trying to get you.
Yeah, and they're like, no kidding. So the man is very scary for them, and they start running away from the man.
Yeah, and they try to lose him in the village and circle their way back to the train station.
Right.
Hoping a train will be there. But instead what they find
Is Annie.
in a car.
Right?
A modern vehicle.
Wow. And Andy shows up and saves the day. She opens the door for the kids to jump in, and they don't even hesitate. Like, they know Jonathan called her Crazy Annie, and didn't really go into why they refer to her as Crazy Annie.
No,
And
but he just said, oh, she's a disgruntled neighbor, and she seemed very mistrustful of what Jonathan was doing up there, so the kids are instantly like, we're going to get in this car with this woman, and she's going to save us from this weird man.
She said she lived up on the hill, that dark hill close to that scary house, and she also heard the moaning, so maybe she can protect them.
Yeah, and as she tries to drive away with them, the man is increasingly upset, and he throws himself in front of the vehicle and tries to stop the car, but like she just like knocks him out of the way with the car. Now doesn't like run him over, but like hits him with the vehicle.
Yep.
And
Goes.
guns it, and they're like, oh, you're not taking us into the village? And she's like, no, I live on the hill, remember?
And this is a great little ploy because she actually brings them back to Jonathan's house.
She does.
And Jonathan and Sonia are just waiting outside for the kids to be brought back. Jonathan grabs Peter, and Sonia and Abby Sonia and Annie grabs Abby.
Yes.
And they go back into the house. So this is at the point where they find out that Abby also lives at the house.
Yeah, and that he's known Annie this whole time.
They're in cahoots.
She works for him, and she's like, no problem, boss, and of course
Right.
I got them.
So she played a character.
Yes.
She played a trustworthy, opposing character to Jonathan. So if the kids ever did escape, which Jonathan kind of thought they may,
Figured they might, yeah.
she would be a trusting source that they would go with. And he was so right.
Oh, he was very right.
So Jonathan tells Abby that he tested her hair this morning, and it's just what he needed. And he goes into why.
Yeah, so this is like really, really, really bizarre and really weird and really out there. I figured I flip-flop early on as we were talking about the story and building up to it, whether he was a Frankenstein type guy or a ghoul. Turns out he's a little bit of both.
He is, yeah. So insert Jonathan's backstory. 2,000 years ago, he found out how to keep mummies alive.
Because, you know, he is a mummy.
And keeping them alive means to keeping their organs also alive and fresh.
Yeah, so in order to keep himself alive forever, as a mummy, he had to consume the recently dead or other mummies. And because he couldn't have a fresh supply, he found as many mummies as he could, and he also kept them alive. So there's some sort of combination of a chant and secret formula that involves her hair.
Yeah, so himself, Sonia, Annie, and the cat have been eating mummies to stay alive, is the impression that we get.
And the mummies were kept alive and kept fresh with this protein that's found in this specific family's hair.
Right, so what they need specifically is straight, jet black hair that, contains the protein. And
Abby and her brother both have it.
yes, but also the mummies have a new chant.
They do.
It says hair, hair, hair.
And this was weird because the mummies were chanting before, let me die. So now why are they crying out for the hair?
This was a WTF moment for me because I don't think that was well played on the mummy's behalf, because if they want to die and they want the hair to stay alive, they're on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, so this was a weird writing thing that's very much a plot hole.
Right, so this is when the man with the scar enters, and Jonathan
Is not Jonathan.
No, he tells the man to leave and to leave now. And Abby asks him why was the man with the scar chasing them?
Yeah, and she's like, oh my gosh, you're here, but why are you chasing us? And he's like, because I'm your Uncle Jonathan.
Oh, fudge. Right? So he was there to get the children. This is his opportune moment. He finally found where the children were, as he expected, and he was here to take them to safety.
Yeah, because he didn't give up. And it turns out that this man who'd had them pretending to be Jonathan all the time was actually Tutton Raw, because why not?
And he saw the pictures that the actual Uncle Jonathan was showing around the village because he was really excited for Abby and Peter to come along.
Yeah, and he was like, look at these kids and oh, how they've grown, and I haven't seen them since they were babies, and he was doing that kind of thing.
And that's when the fake Jonathan seen the hair, and he's like, okay.
This is how I know.
This is what I need. We're getting short on our supply. So he sends Sonia to real Jonathan's house to delay him from the train station.
Yes, this is why he's late getting there, because she stops to have a conversation and keeps him delayed, which is enough time for Annie to show up. And technically, I guess her job was to keep them there while being pretending to be trustworthy, because that kept them there long enough for the fake Jonathan to show up with the carriage.
And have this story made up that he wanted to make an entrance, and he thought it'd be really cool. So Abby, Peter, and Jonathan run from the quarters.
Yes, they burst their way out through the door.
They head towards Peter's room.
They head to Peter's room because she's like, I have an idea for how to get us out of here, because once they leave the room, of course, Jonathan doesn't know which way to go. He's never been in there.
No.
They know the way out, but they're like, well, let's go to the room because they're never going to let us out the front, like just out the front door. They'll catch us.
Right.
There's 3 of them. We were lucky to get out of this mummy chamber.
Right, so this is where Abby remembers what happens to the cat. So she tells Peter to grab the squirt gun.
But Peter can't find his squirt gun anywhere in the room, and they're getting closer. So they make a beeline to Abby's room next door.
Right, and her squirt gun is there, but it's dry. So she's
been emptied.
She does have time, though, to refill it.
She does. She goes to the bathroom, refills it, just as they show up at the door.
And she hands the gun to Jonathan.
But Jonathan is late on the trigger, and they get the jump on him. And so when they get the jump on him, it knocks the water gun out of his hand. So Jonathan and Tutton Raw are fighting, rolling around on the ground, and Annie has the water gun, and Sonia is blocking the door so they can't get out of the bedroom.
Right, so this is where Abby goes back to her skill being taller than Peter and goes and fills her mouth with water.
Yeah, now this is a really good callback and a nice piece of foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Because at the very beginning of the story, she wins the water fight when their grandma comes in and distracts him by taking a sip of water from a glass of water that was on the counter, spitting water at the back of Peter's neck.
Right, so apparently she has both range and aim with this.
Yes, she's well adept at spitting water.
Right, so she prepares herself, and when she enters the room, fake Jonathan asks her where she was too, and she spits at him in the face.
Yes. And the way they describe this is one of the most horrifying things. I loved it. I loved this description so much. His face starts to melt slowly. And as it's melting and rotting and falling away, and an ear falls off, and it goes down to skull, and the skull starts to crumble, and everything on his head goes away except for his eyes. And his eyes roll down across his body, and then the rest of his body disintegrates in the clothes, and the clothes are left in a pile, and the eyes finish rolling forward in front of her and stare up at her before they go to dust.
Right.
What a description!
That was rare. Very well done. Also, as he finished crumbling, both Annie and Sonia also crumbled.
Yeah, so apparently this magic was all connected and had them connected together.
So I'm thinking more like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer sire. So like once you kill the sire, the offspring of it go
Die.
with it. That's immediately where my mind went.
Yeah, it's definitely one of these ancient things where once he brought himself to life, everybody else was kept alive based on his power.
Right.
So I'm assuming he was the only one that had to consume the organs.
That's the impression I got at this point.
Yeah. So the other two didn't need to, but they were alive because he was sustaining them.
Mm-hmm. So when they all crumbled, Abby wanted to go back and check the mummies.
Yeah, she wanted to make sure that they were going to be okay because they had been moaning in pain.
Right, so when they entered the room, the mummies were quiet. So Abby, once again, tries to get a closer look to make sure that they were indeed not as animated as they previously were.
And she sees one resting there with its arms crossed like usual.
Yeah, and then that one jumps up at her to thank her.
Yeah, next jump scare, and pulls it into it, but it whispers in her ear, thank you, as it does, and then the arms go, and she can tell they've all since died, and it was thankful that she had done what they had wanted, which again makes the hair thing very out of place.
It does. Like, I can understand maybe Sonia and Annie chanting hair, 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 but not the mummies that wanted to die.
No, especially if they went through the trouble of thanking her after for defeating him so that they could finally be put to rest, and his power, his spell over them that kept them alive with the hair was over.
Right, so they could rest in peace and not be in pain anymore. So Abby and Peter go back with Jonathan, and Jonathan puts them on a train back to Granny V.
Yeah, so we're assuming they stay there with Jonathan for the rest of the week that they were supposed to be there.
Yeah, the story kind of washed over that.
It does. It kind of skips forward to, oh, it was nice to see you, and he's seeing them off at the train station.
Right.
And they go back to see Granny V, and she's clearly expecting them to come home.
Mm-hmm. So, the ending was wrapped up, I think, a little bit too fast.
Uh-huh.
So they don't talk about communicating with Granny V and saying that she was out of hospital ready for them to come back. They get the train tickets, they just go. And when they get to Granny V's house, they find her up in bed, still very weak, telling them both that she's not very well.
Yeah, that she's very, very sick. And this is the way they paint the picture. It's very heartbreaking because especially coupled with the beginning story and description before they leave. And now that they're back, it's super obvious that what's happening here is Granny is dying.
Yeah. So Abby and Peter bring her a package.
Yeah, they get her up out of bed and they say, come with us and have this, we brought you something.
Yes, you have to eat this. So they unwrap the package, and this red meat-like thing.
Yeah, it's this red, purpley, meaty thing is there, and she's like, is that some kind of liver? Like, did you bring me liver? And they're like, no, it's fine, like, don't worry about it. And she's like, oh, it smells kind of off. Don't worry, this will be the best thing you've ever had. This'll help you out.
And it'll help you live a very long time.
Dun dun dun, the end.
So what did you think of this story?
I did really enjoy it. but I do think it was definitely wrapped up way too quick.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been really nice to see, because Jonathan reminisced a bit about how much he remembered and loved Granny V growing up himself.
Mm-hmm.
So it seemed like it was wrapped up too quick, because obviously he would have had to be in on this. They were obviously there for the full amount of time. They were meant to be there despite having the run-in, but we don't really see or hear about any of what happens.
And if Tut and Ra 2,000 years ago figured out the elixir or potion, whatever, to keep the mummies alive, it's probably something
he was the only one that had it.
And it's probably something a little bit more than just the black hair.
Yes. So, first of all, they would have had to figure out the elixir,
Mm-hmm.
go through his things, obviously, find out what the
Mm-hmm.
elixir is, find the ingredients, put everything together with the hair,
Mm-hmm.
resurrect a mummy in order to get the organ.
And bring that mummy with them, because they need to keep it alive for Granny V to continue eating then.
Right. Like, there's so many problems with what's happened here.
It's just the ending. It's like, the ending was... It's missing a chapter, almost.
Yeah, and I completely feel for these kids. Like, and this whole story is somewhat believable. Though how big that house is, we'll never know. Because apparently there was a full bat cave under the house in addition to the tomb as well.
Yep, and that's where, like, the guard bats were kept.
Yeah, as pets.
Yeah.
So that was super weird, and definitely went way out into the cliffside somewhere, and it was a huge, huge house. But then aside, like, how would they have done all these things? Jonathan would have had to be in on it, and he'd have to know about it. Like I said, they'd have to go through his things, read his books, figure out the formula.
And if the formula was figured out 2,000 years ago, it was probably written in hieroglyphics.
Hieroglyphics. So is there even a translation?
Because we don't know.
And they do mention there's hieroglyphics on the wall still in this recreated tomb in this Victorian house.
Right, and we don't know what all the hieroglyphics mean even today. We know a majority, like, people who are trained can read it, but the majority of people don't know what any of it is.
Right. So if there's no translation in English lying around, because obviously he can read hieroglyphics,
Yeah.
then... like, how are they pulling this off? I like I said, I feel for them, and it's their love for their grandma is very real and very believable, and it's totally played up.
It is.
But how would they be able to pull this off and make the elixir and do it? It's just too... it makes no sense. It's an ending that makes absolutely no sense, and is done for the sake of being a cliffhanger ending, but also preventing that having to have a talk about death in a kid's book in a way that's different from having a villain die.
Right, so it was a nice little ending for the book. They're like, haha, we're cheating death. We got you.
And our hair is what's going to keep our grandmother alive for as long as we're alive.
Yeah, but it doesn't tell you how it reaches that point. But other than that, like, I love the story. I love the way that it was like a borderline kidnapping, and...
yeah, and it kept giving you little hints and clues throughout, like the water spitting thing at the beginning comes back, which is not something you expect. You expect the water guns to play a role, but you don't really expect her mouth spitting thing.
And
they're both very clever, especially her with like, let's get the water because it disintegrated the cat, and she's instantly like, something's wrong. We have to get out of this house.
And
like,
she checks her cell phone, and she checks the house phone. The language that Sonia uses when talking to the kids, like, her phrases are very old school. Like, very...
and she almost is not quite 100% there, and she like tends to repeat things that Jonathan says and stuff like that, showing their connection. I also like how whenever they were near her, they talked about this strong perfume smell she had. So it made me wonder, like, was she partly like have the drying out potpourri stuff inside her that the Egyptians used to dry out the carcasses? Like, was that still in there giving off a flowery scent?
Yeah, maybe she was more fresh or not as wrapped and mummified as the other mummies. So when Jonathan
or
came
maybe
back...
she was, but when Jonathan brought her back, she was such an old mummy that like all that stuff was still in there.
Yeah.
Because he seemed more freshly dead and less of a mummy, whereas maybe Sonia and Annie were more so mummies.
Maybe.
And like to modernize herself and have a tattoo, and it was different.
Yeah. Well, come to think of it, did they actually they called it a tattoo, but like
the bird was the same kind of blue bird in color and shape that matched. And you were meant to put this together. They don't outright say it, which I thought was nice and subtle. But it matched the little blue bird statues that they found around the house.
And they talk about they still can't replicate that blue
exact
color.
shade of blue, yeah.
Yeah, that should have been a connector.
Yeah, so this was a really good, really fun, just well put together story with good characters.
Yeah.
Again, there was no weird boy-girl activity moments. There was no weird shaming. There was none of that with this. It was just a really good, interesting, fun little story.
Yeah. So we're 3 for 3 for Horrorland.
And this gives us our next actual death, because she killed off the villains in this one.
Yeah, she killed off Jonathan, Sonia, Annie, and Cleopatra the cat.
Yeah,
she's
so
in a
this
roll.
was like,
Sheesh.
this was good. This was really well done.
Yeah.
Unless you have anything else to add, do we have any questions for the viewers? Did you guys want to tell us what you thought of the ending? Did you enjoy these villains? Did this story seem plausible to you or not?
Right. Also, we tend to digress from the original, was it 62 or 64 books?
Yeah.
Into the later series. We've done it twice now. So what are your thoughts on that? Is that something you want us to continue?
Well, I guess we've done it 3 times now, haven't we? Because we've done Horrorland twice before.
Yeah.
And then we did Series 2000, so now we're into Horrorland again.
Yeah, so is this something you want us to continue?
Yeah, do you mind having a look at the later books like this?
Yeah, or do you want us to just stick to the original 62?
Yeah, but I mean, personally, I'm having fun with the Horrorland ones at least.
Me too. It would be interesting to find out how accessible these are. I would imagine the Horrorland ones are probably easier to find than the Series 2000.
We'll probably mostly stay away from the Series 2000. The only other Series 2000 one we're really planning to read is there is a mummy one in there, or sorry, a dummy one in there somewhere.
Yeah, a slabby.
Yeah, which we think relates enough to the other Slappy stories that we'll probably do it. But accessibility we know is harder with that series, so we probably won't dive into Series 2000 more than that extra book.
And that's something we only just discovered after we had talked about doing it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our book for next time, the first in the Dummy series. Night of the Living Dummy.
I'm excited.
I can't wait to get back to the Slappy ones and see if they're actually as good as I remember.
I know, right? Please don't disappoint me. So they can find you on Twitter?
Yes, at Glitter Macaroon with 1 T and 2 O's, and you are on Twitter at
coffee_with_Jen with 1 N.
And remember to hashtag everything GBC Ghost Next Door. We will see it. We do check the hashtag.
We do.
And we will answer any questions. And like I said, hopefully we'll get enough material to do a viewer feedback episode.
Which sounds so exciting. Until next time.
Reader beware.
You're in for a scare.
And you're taking us through the plot this time?
I'll take us through. Yep.
I did much better going through the plot this time.
You did
Nate.
amazing.
I didn't do as bad as I did before. I was all over the place the other 2 times. We had to go through the plot, and I kept going, oh no, wait, oh, I forgot.
Nope, you did good. You're really, really good.
You're proud of me, aren't you? Okay.